This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is called to order. May we have roll call, please? Yes?
Commissioner Freeman. Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Maybe.
Here.
Here. We will now have a moment of silence. Thank you. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on our agenda, we have public comment. Please come up, state your name and address, and sign in also at the table. Do we have our timer? Okay. Any public comment? You can
Leslie. Good evening, Commission and Chair. Leslie Feigl, Livingston Chamber of Commerce, and the all of the invitations went out for the Business Leaders Gala 2019. So many of your businesses in Livingston and Park County, top 2 students of the year, seniors every year. We have a nonprofit of the year, and the list goes on. And the gala is on November 16th, and we still have about 40 tickets left. With great to see some of y'all come out and enjoy the evening, and the tickets we're selling them down there at the Chamber of Commerce. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, moving on to our consent items. Tonight we have 2 consent items. Consent items A and B. Do I have a motion from the commission or any consent items you would like pulled for discussion?
I move we approve consent items A and B.
Second.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland.
Yes?
Commissioner Freeman.
Four.
Commissioner Maybe.
Four.
Motion passes. Tonight, we have no proclamations. We have 2 scheduled public comments. The first scheduled public comment is the City of Livingston invites Burton Planning Services to provide project update for the community on city growth policy. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jim Lerner is going to speak to us real quick while I replace this microphone. So he's from Burton Planning Services. They are the contractor that's doing the growth policy. They came in yesterday. They did some tours around the city, got to know the area, the city and surrounding areas, did a couple of focus group with stakeholders. Yesterday, met with staff this morning, and he's going to just give you pretty much an introductory brief to where they are in the process, how it's going to work, and then you can have questions at that point.
Thank you, sir. Commission members, thank you for the opportunity to come this evening and give you a quick update on where we have been so far in the growth policy, as well as where we are planning on going. So during any portion of this, if you have a question, please stop me and I'll answer it to the best of my ability. So as you are aware, we were selected by the city to conduct this growth strategy or growth policy for the city of Livingston. Overview tonight, we just want to go over the process, discuss what we've already done, and then making sure you have an opportunity to voice any questions that you have currently tonight, and I can answer them to the best of my ability or get back with the commission as well. So the next item is the introductions. Obviously, we are working hand in hand with your administration as well as the commission. Constant contact through Faith has been wonderful in making sure we are on schedule and doing what we need to do. Introduction of the team, of the consultant team, is myself, Jim Lerner. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director for the for Burton Planning Services, as well as another major consultant or team consultant is Amelia Mansfield, who is actually running the project and will be the project manager. She'll be out here in the spring. She sent me in the winter. I lost that flip of the coin, so she'll be out here as well as we've partnered with Applied Communications up out of Whitefish, Montana, who will be doing a majority of the public engagement and the stakeholder work. She was down, Kate McMahon was down yesterday working with us as well. So that's kind of the brief overview of the three major people that you will see working on this project. There's our lovely pictures. And then Kate is on the next slide as well. So the majority of the communication will be handled through Amelia, and then obviously as needed, we'll funnel through the rest of the team. So what is it? As Montana, it requires, this is an integral land use plan for the city, and it's a guidance tool that will use public input, staff input, and many other forms of input to formulate this growth policy. So it is going to reflect the needs of the city. It's not going to reflect the needs of Burton Planning Services or Whitefish. It's going to be what the city wants. And that's why stakeholder engagement is going to be critical to make sure we provide you the growth policy that is fitting for you and is vetted through the community participation process. And then the next and final item is it will assist the city in the future in making development and expansion decisions as it pertains to annexation, development, and other things pertaining to the growth policy. So as I mentioned, I came in late Sunday. Monday morning, we got a whirlwind tour of the entire city by Jim and Mike, so I appreciate that. I'm pretty sure we covered every square inch of the city, took many photos, and got a overview of what the current status of the city is in terms of development, things that have not been approved, that have been approved, and issues that are currently being investigated by the city. We also met with a few people, and this is the first of many of the listening sessions that will take place over the course of the next few months. We mainly met with some city staff and some people in the high level positions that we wanted to get information from them, so then we could reach out to other people as well. So we're making sure we include everybody. So there will be more listening sessions as we go. We did about 4 hours of conversation, and I got half a notebook full of notes. So we'll be dissecting that as well. This morning, as I mentioned, we met with the city staff and gave them a brief overview, went over some nuts and bolts things such as invoicing and communication and whatnot. And then here I am tonight giving you a brief update on the start of this project. So there's 5 main components of this process. Task 1, we've already started and we'll be completing in the next few weeks based on tonight's closeout of this commission meeting. We will then begin collecting, and we have begun collecting information from various sources. The hospital is willing to provide information, the community foundation, a lot of people have already stepped up, the chamber. So we'll be reaching out to those organizations to get any information that may be pertinent to this process to make sure we're not missing anything. So that it will take place this month, the month of November. And then we'll start actually doing some analysis of that information, bringing in those stakeholder listening sessions, making sure we are addressing the needs adequately of the city. So that would get us into task 3, which is the growth policy update, which is kind of, it will be the draft of the policy. And then we will submit it to the city for review, obviously adoption. And I apologize, this slide is a little misleading, but task 5, public involvement, is actually task 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll be involved with the public via an interactive website and some other things. So task 5 is actually concurrent throughout this whole process. And I did mention the public involvement. There'll be a website, online survey. Yesterday was mentioned that not everyone has internet, so we will be approaching others to figure out how we reach those people that don't have access to the internet. Emails, I know many organizations have already offered up their email lists. So there'll be many ways that we attempt to reach out to the public to make sure their voices are heard in this project. The main 8 items that we have to address according to the MCA, land use, population, housing, public facilities policy. All those things will be addressed in this growth policy. So it's not a small task, and we're up to the challenge, and we look forward to working on this over the next few months. So if there's any of these items that need specific attention, I'd ask that you let us know that so we can make sure we pay particular attention to some of those things over the course of the project. So based on the feedback I've already gotten, I probably have my top 3 of what needs to be addressed, and we'll go over that in a little bit. So thank you. Here's the timeline. We've started in October. We aim to finish in September. This was part of the proposal that we submitted. It's a little hard to see, but basically, I mentioned that task 5, that is the very bottom line. As you can see, it runs through the entirety of the project. And then as we go, in the spring, we'll be hopefully having the draft policy for you all to review. Sorry, in summer, not spring. Summer would have the draft policy. So that's kind of the tentative schedule at this point. And obviously, if we need more time or need to hurry up, obviously we can be amenable to that as well. So we've done a lot so far, but there's obviously a lot of other things. I mentioned we have to accumulate the data. Park County's already reached out, and Mike has put us in contact with all the GIS data, the mapping needs. We will then gather all that stuff, start the analysis, draft the goals and objectives of what this policy would look like, look at the needs and the trends. So look at neighboring communities, seeing what the region is doing as a whole in terms of population growth, economic growth, and whatnot. So those are that's the main nuts and bolts of the plan itself. So that will take a lot of time. And again, interspersed between that will be those stakeholder engagement processes. That was a very brief overview of a very complex project that we're excited to work on. But I mainly wanted to get in front of you to answer any questions that I can at this point. Obviously, this being the city's project, the city's plan, I want to make sure I'm here to answer your questions going forward. So I would give the floor back to you all to ask any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, do you want to start with any questions? Anyone in particular? Go ahead, Warren.
As far as the public feedback, would at least some of it take the form of like meetings at either here or the Shane Center or some other public venue?
Absolutely. I think this morning we determined it'll be in here at least one December, January, depending on the time frame. So yes, there will be in-person meetings as well. Thank you.
Melissa, do you?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Melissa.
You said you had a top 3 before we ask you a bunch of questions. Do you want to share what because I'm guessing the city staff already told you a lot of what we've been talking about here. So
Sure.
I'm curious what your top 3 are.
Yeah,
first.
the resounding comments over the last 2 days were housing. And that is either affordability, lack thereof, combination of both, senior, workforce, all housing, all lumped into one. And then the second one would be the transportation, mainly the railroad over underpass, and addressing that and how transportation works in a larger picture, but mainly specifically the railroad itself. And then the third one is I had it down, the engagement part, to make sure that in this process, we aren't leaving anyone out, to make sure that we do a specific directed approach to make sure we reach out to anybody and everybody. So we had planned on doing that anyway, but that was an emphasis placed upon us or myself over the last 2 days.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's the big stuff. I would add, because you asked, what are we missing?
Yes.
I'm guessing you've heard this before, but I'm just going to say it out loud in case you haven't.
Sure.
I would include transitional housing as a gap.
Okay.
It seems like that I've heard nonprofits talk about. If that makes sense, you know what I mean when I say transitional housing?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And variation in density, housing density, and we have a lot of single family.
Yeah, condos, apartments,
Yeah, just like
single
more of a
families.
variety, so people can, as they're going through different life phases, they have something that's suitable for that phase of their life. I think that maybe it's part of transitional.
Yes.
When you talk about transportation, I think including pedestrians in that, thinking about not just how to get cars across the tracks, but how do you get people across the tracks that are outside of cars
Sure.
safely? If you got the tour, you saw what the sidewalk option is like, and the city can elaborate on what that looks like throughout the year, how it's different in the middle of winter
Oh, I bet.
versus summer, and because that really impacts mobility for
Mhm.
people without cars.
Yes.
And I think probably you also heard from Michael about this, because we've talked about this too, is some of our boards will have input
Yes.
to offer.
Yes.
And so some of our board members are here actually, and I think they're just waiting for the appropriate time to share information with you.
Yes.
So you can hear what's sort of been on the radar in the long term, and what they're waiting to work on.
Yes.
as it
Michael and I
pertain- Yeah.
briefly spoke about that yesterday of convening a group of the boards together to get that.
And figuring out, yeah. And I trust that you all know how to do that, but I think that could shed some light on some concerns from different parts of the community.
Sure.
I think that's like when I see is there growth you don't want, or are there specific areas we should target? I think you might get more feedback from the boards. And I also hope that some of the community outreach will help shed light on those topics, since those are sort of, there's some conflict
Sure.
with those questions, I think, within the community about what is wanted. So hopefully the process of public engagement will help unfold those topics.
Sure.
as
Yeah.
well
And
as-
that's what our hope is
Yeah.
to peel back
Um,
those layers.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, exactly. I think that's the really broad stuff. I'm sure I'm forgetting something specific, but I think the engagement with the boards is going to help pull out this specific thing. So I don't want to take
Absolutely.
up all the time tonight.
No, that's fine. And I
Those-
laid my card out there as well. So
Yeah.
if you have
Can we share this?
Oh,
Or have
absolutely.
the city share this with?
what I would ask is Amelia, Faith and Michael have that contact information from Amelia. She's the project manager. So for continuity, I would ask that everything goes to her first, and then she would disseminate it to the proper individuals, whether that's myself or Kate or whatnot. But Michael and Faith have that information as well. And I think it's on
Yeah.
the last slide as well.
I just don't want to blast you with a bunch of individuals from boards if there's going to be an opportunity that,
Feel free to share whoever you think.
yeah, I want to make sure we're not making it more confusing than it needs to be.
Yeah, and what I would ask from the commission is anything you have, and I've asked that of the city too. If you think you have information that's pertinent to this, send it to us, and then we'll figure out where it fits, if it fits, and if it doesn't, maybe follow up with you and figure out what the meaning of the document or the information is, so we can make sure everything's included.
That sounds good. I feel like I could take up too much time with the details from the planning board, so I don't want to do that. I want to let them speak for themselves in that space. I think that's I really like the update. I hope that we can continue to get updates as more information is available, because I think the public is super interested.
Absolutely. We talked about that at the kickoff meeting. So we're going to have a website. It's going to be hosted by us, but it'll be a specific link to the city. Once that's up, I think the city's going to look at it by next Friday to make sure it looks adequate to what the staff wants. And then once we get that okayed by the staff, it'll be live. And then we will push it out. We will do specific updates of major milestones that we've hit as the team, to push out there to make sure the community is aware on a more than monthly basis, whether that's your Facebook website, something like that, email blast, to make sure, we're just not updating in April. We're going to have periodic updates more frequent than that.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's,
I'll add to just something Melissa said, and then Mel, if you'd like. You're asking what is missing. I feel like I could tell you 1,000 things.
Sure.
Right? But I do want to make sure we're focusing on recreation, which is a huge issue in our community and a
Mhm.
huge asset.
Yes.
And so when you ask what we're missing, do you want us to get that explicit as far as
Absolutely. If you, through all this process, if you say, hey, Jim, you guys are really missing the boat on recreation
mhm.
or trout fishing. I mean, whatever that is, please let us know and make sure we dive into that.
Okay.
That's not a problem
I
whatsoever.
think, like Melissa was saying, when you work with the committees
Mhm.
or our boards,
The boards.
we have a parks and trails
Sure.
committee. We have a planning committee and people are very involved and they're very serious about the boards that they're on, and they contribute a lot to the commission. So you're going to see from them the things that our community really wants as well.
Absolutely.
I'll let Mel talk before I have a couple more questions too.
Yeah. Jim, I'm just curious as to our population and how many cities like us you have seen as far as the population goes.
I've worked in cities I'm actually just starting a project on the Ohio River for a city of about 7,000, city of Belpre, Ohio, doing an economic development strategy for them. 2,500, a town of Muskingum University, luckily my alma mater. So I'm working for them as well on some development issues. Burton Planning has done 200 jobs in about 10 years of existence. So big cities we've done little snippets in city of Toledo, and that's about 45,000 people. So the gamut from experience wise is all over the place in terms of population.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll ask another question. What does the timeline of the meetings look like? Because I personally would like to know, like, one meeting a month, one meeting every 2 months, so that people know we're going to generally have the meetings at the same time. How often,
Mhm.
what time, so they know, if they can't make it 1 month, I can commit to the next month, or I can
Get
commit
it on
to
their
that.
calendar.
So what is generally the number of meetings that we would have opportunities to attend as community members?
I don't have that answer today because we're going to go back with the information we were given and work with the city staff to establish that schedule, because we weren't sure, is there, are we reaching out to 8,000 people or 80 people? So we got to make sure we know that, but we can work with the city to make sure that is published here relatively soon, so we can get that on people's agendas as to when those potential meetings are going to be. I know the next one's going to be, like I said, in December-ish, maybe January. But then also the meetings of the park board, we just got to figure that out at this point. Unfortunately, I can't answer the specific dates and when that will be, but it'll soon be coming to you guys, the schedule.
Could you give me a general, what do you normally do in a community? Is it all over the board depending on?
Yeah, a lot of people honestly are going away from the face-to-face. We got a survey back. It was like 65% response rate on an online survey in a community. We had 6 people show up to the in-person meeting. So it's really community specific on how people show up and how people express their opinion. We've attempted to do paper surveys at the library and the city building, and that's gone well, and that's tanked. So it's really across the board. It's really specific to what the community responds to, and we'll know pretty soon how that's going to play out, so we can figure out how to play to the public in terms of public participation. Obviously, if no one's going to fill out a paper survey, we're not going to continue to do that. We'll figure out some other way to get in front of people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Melissa, do you have more that you'd like to ask, or?
My flight leaves about 7:30 tomorrow, so I just asked that we wrap up by
No,
then.
I mean, I
I'll
feel,
talk about this all night. I love this stuff.
I feel like this is just like really initial introductory getting started. And my hope is that we'll have opportunities to let all these stakeholders and the public and the boards share information with you first.
Sure.
And, or not necessarily first, at least at the same time. And so that we're not just 5 people speaking
Sure.
for 7,500 people. And then as it goes on, we can ask you more questions. as
Dive.
the-
Yes,
Yeah, as the process goes on and we're
absolutely.
seeing what the feedback is like and what things are brought to us that maybe haven't come up yet because the list is long and
Sure.
it's great to let people speak for themselves.
Absolutely.
So I don't right now, but I probably will over as this continues.
Warren, do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Mel?
Also,
I think I'm done too with my questions. I feel like we're right at the beginning of the
Absolutely.
discussion, so I could ask a million, but I'd rather not and
No,
wait
I
for
appreciate it.
the
Absolutely.
process to happen.
Yeah, no, and that was the main purpose of the presentation tonight, is just to give you a quick, brief overview of the process and make sure you understand to reach out to us at any time if you need something, preferably directly to Amelia, who will be able to help answer your questions.
I guess I do have one last one.
Sure.
Sorry.
No.
It's also a timeline based one. Could we go to the slide with the timeline? Uh, Generally, it's about an 11-month process. What may hinder that process as far as being on time? Or does it go faster than or sooner would we
Yeah.
have the results of our?
My experience, not from this community, but from a lot of communities, that hinders time is the city's response to our drafts or our questions as the consultant team. I'm working on one. They've had the draft for 5 weeks and we have no comments back. So that I have found usually inhibits a lot of the progress. Sometimes people may, the commission may say, hey, we need a little bit more time to address this issue. Can we take a quick look and pause this for 30 days or something like that?
Because of
Um,
meetings and,
Correct.
Yep.
Absolutely.
or staff time.
I guarantee you so far the city staff has been absolutely on top of the ball, getting us this information we need, contracts signed and whatnot. So I don't envision that being a problem whatsoever. So we will work as fast as we can to accelerate this as we can without compromising the integrity of the project.
Well,
Things that could speed it up. If things go swimmingly and we come back to you and we, nail the project first and foremost, or, we're able to shave off 2 weeks here because of scheduling or whatnot. We will do that. When we are out here, we will hit the public events. We talked about a whole bunch of events the city holds that we could get out and hold like a table or a booth at one of those events to get feedback as well. So we will combine that with our trips out here, but both for monetary reasons and efficiency reasons. So all those things could help speed up the process.
Great, thank you.
But with that being said,
Mhm.
I don't want to speed it up for the sake of speed. I'd rather get it right and do it correctly than rush it through.
We would like that too.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Any last comments before we move on? Well, thank you, Jim.
Appreciate your time.
Your time.
Thank you so much.
Our next scheduled public comment is the City of Livingston invites Dan Clark, Director of MSU Extension's Local Government Center, to present information to the community on the different forms of local government. Dan. Great. Please.
All right,
Uh-huh.
you invited me. Like Jim, I could talk about this all night, so. I'm gonna bring my little flip charts over. doing this instead of PowerPoint. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how would be the best place for me to set these up so that you all can see? Because I'm most concerned about you. You're all kind of important, but. You know. Can you see this?
I can make
Can I move this? Okay.
Sure.
Hi. All right.
Stop tearing up my Velcro.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna need that. Workers' comp claim here in a minute if I get too wound up. Okay.
Dan, I'm
Yeah.
wondering, do you guys think, oh,
Use the big whiteboard.
like trying to get as far back as possible so at least the public can sort of see what you're doing that way? I'm trying to think of a, but our camera's there. If the camera was there, it would help, but I'm trying to think if he moved it back. And we,
Or I could come up here if
and
you
you-
guys want to sit down there.
No, we can't see you.
If you move around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corner right there.
and
They
there,
move us in the-
I knew
Room
we
full of
could
smart
come,
people, we can solve a problem.
Yep.
How about that? Does that work?
how's that?
How about the microphone?
We can move that around wherever you need it, if you need it.
We're gonna give you the wireless microphone.
Well-
You're gonna hold it.
Okay.
He was looking for an excuse to break it out
Yeah, he's.
You put it in his pocket.
about Parker.
It's still live, so.
Just kidding.
I have two. I don't know why.
But you know, you still know it. Everyone
Oh, yeah,
knows.
yeah.
This skinny long microphone.
Still get one.
Ready, Mel? All right. Does this also go through here or just to the?
It goes through the speakers
And the camera. All right. What's going to happen now?
Are you still climbing mountains?
I am still climbing mountains. Thank you for asking. But yeah, we'll have to talk about, ooh, I could get down a whole rabbit hole on that, but we won't. Well, thank you for the invitation to come visit and your patience with this whole comedy show going on here. I've been asked to talk about the different forms of government. What I want to do is I'm going to start from the beginning. I want to start with 1972. What was one of the most significant things that happened in the state of Montana in 1972? Okay, so we adopted a constitution. So in that constitution, what does it say? What is our constitution's purpose? What does it say in a constitution? Wow. What do you think? What's contained in a constitution? Is it okay to ask questions? It's going to be like a workshop. Okay. So what's that? Citizens' rights. So that's one of the things that we'll find in the Constitution, the rights of citizens, the function and form of government, purpose of government. It also lays out, in a way, a vision for the state. This is who we think we are and what we're trying to accomplish. And it's the relationship between the government and the citizens it serves, right? So it lays all that out. Then once the Constitution's completed, it goes through its process, it's ratified by the public. What's the next thing? Who gets it then? Where does it go and what do they do with it? Legislature. So the legislature then gets it. And what do they do with it? They make laws, right? They make the laws that are consistent with the Constitution. So here it's a very brief document, right? It's about 72 pages and it's about the size that can fit in the back of your pocket. And so it's a high level, 30,000 foot view of government and its relationship with the people in the state of Montana. The legislature, though, drills down and they say, okay, now we need to make laws to operationalize what it says here in the Constitution. Where are the sideboards, right? Where's the lane? Where's the ditches on both sides of the road, right? We want to make sure we know when we're operating consistent with the Constitution, when we're not. So we have the legislature develops those statutes for us that helps guide us and keeps us on the straight and narrow. Part of that expectation then is once the legislature is done, fortunately at this point, the legislature has chosen not to micromanage every aspect of government, particularly cities and counties. They basically say, here is your responsibility, here's your powers. You go forth and figure out how to make that work in your community. So in Livingston, you create your own policies that operationalize the laws that have been adopted by the legislature that conform with the Constitution. So you have your local policies. Right? These local policies, for example, you probably have ground rules or rules of procedure for this very meeting that I'm probably violating a half dozen of them right now, right? You have the rules about public comment, when, where we meet. You've got certain policies that operationalize what it says here in by the legislature. You must do these things, and then you have policies or ordinances that say this is how we're going to do it in our community. Okay, so these local policies. Now, what happens when the legislature uses words that are ambiguous? Words that we don't have a clear definition of what that means. And so when you're creating your policies, it is unclear for you to say, well, we're not sure when we're operating in or out of the law because the law is ambiguous. Who can we ask or appeal to get answers to some of those ambiguous questions we have, or questions we have about the ambiguity in the law? Who's somebody we can go and ask and say, please give us an answer? Yeah. Yes. Yes, me. I'm one of those resources. You have a city attorney. You also have the attorney general, right? Because even some of these, you can ask the city attorney is going to go, I don't know. So the city attorney will ask other city attorneys, and they'll go, we don't know. And so then they all get together and say, well, what is the question we want to ask? And then they'll ask the attorney general. The attorney general then will create an answer to answer that question and relieve us of that ambiguity. So that's one outlet, is the Montana Attorney General. The other source would be the Supreme Court. Okay, the Montana Supreme Court, right? And that would be through the form of a lawsuit. Okay, so we're not clear what, for example, this is kind of accurate. City of Bozeman and Gallatin County, a lot of growth. The state recently passed a law. The law is a little bit ambiguous, and so a lot of it we don't. When the legislature is creating law, they're not always sure of all the consequences that may come of it. They try to anticipate as much as they can. They create the law and word it in such a way that's hopefully going to cover most of the issues. But in this case, there was some. The attorneys for the county were interpreting law one way, and the city was interpreting it a different way. And so they're not sure, and it was about growth and roads and money. And so one option was to sue each other, right? And then take their case to the court and argue their case to the court system to then get an answer. And so the court then is there to help us understand and overcome the ambiguity in the law. So we have three, the Venn diagram, three overlapping circles. And when we think about government, a democratic society like what we operate in today, and in Montana and in your community, we have three branches of government. What do those branches represent? Okay, so good. We have the executive branch. I heard legislative branch. What's the third one? Judicial branch, right? So you have an executive branch of government. So in the state of Montana, think the governor. Legislative branch, think the legislature. And then the judicial branch, think the Department of Justice and the Supreme Court. And the three of those work together. It's the same with the county. County has a legislative. We'll talk about that one. It's going to be a fun one. We'll get to that. Hold on to that one. And then here locally in Livingston, you have an executive branch. And who would that be? It would be the city manager. Operates as the executive branch. Then you have the legislative branch, which then it would be you folks. And then the judicial branch would be your city court system. Okay. So that's all a primer. Well, yeah. And I've got some more stuff, but that's kind of a primer to set the stage for this next conversation about how to change our form of government. One of the things that came out of the 1972 Constitution that is unique to the state of Montana is that we have a local government review process that every 10 years, in our Constitution, it says every 10 years, we have the ability or the requirement that every local government needs to put on the ballot the question for the voters to consider: do you want to study your form of government? And if the voters vote yes in a majority, then they would elect a study commission. And that study commission then studies the existing form of government, looks at alternative forms of government, and then we'll make a recommendation back to the voters whether to stay the same, stay the course, we don't want to change, or we propose a change to our form of government. And if the voters agree with that and say yes, then that form of government changes. You have a history in Livingston. Have I been saying Livingston the whole time? Lewistown. Where am I at? Livingston. I was surprised I was going to call you Lewistown at some point. So there's a history here that you have been fairly active, relatively speaking, to most municipalities in the state in modifying and changing your form of government as the needs arise. And so you've been somewhat responsive to changing times, changing needs, and how do we have our local government change and morph along with those changing times and needs. So to give you a little history, you may or may not know, in 1970, from 74 to 76, after the Constitution was ratified, then right after that, they said, okay, we're going to do our first voter review process. And so cities and counties, all of them didn't ask the voters. All of them just had to do it. The first round, all cities and all counties had to create a study commission, look at the alternatives, and propose something. They had to propose something on the ballot. Said, this is who we are today, and this is who we could be in the future. What do you want to do, voters? And the voters then chose. Most counties chose to stay the same. Some municipalities shifted, particularly larger metro municipalities. I'll say metro in air quotes for Montana, because, you know, it's big for us, but it's like Billings and some of those places, they all adopted an alternative form of government. So with you folks, as far as our records at the center have for Livingston, you chose, so you had at the beginning in 1974 to 76, you were operating, your existing form of government was a commission executive form of government or commission mayor form. You had a council and you had an elected mayor. And that was your existing form, and you proposed an alternative to the public for them to choose. And your, where did it go? You wanted to amend your existing form of government, and that passed. I don't know what you amended, but you amended it, changed it in some way in 1976. And so you started out of the gate. First time, yeah, we want to tweak it a little bit. So you tweaked the existing form of government. And I don't, what's that? Number of commissioners, you went from 4 to 8 to 5. Okay. So you changed the number of commissioners. Then to jump forward in the next one. So again, 10 years, then in 84 to 86 was the next one. And in that one, I have a little bit better records. Livingston. So Livingston proposed to go from a commission executive amended form of government to a commission manager. That passed at a vote of 121 or 1,021 to stay the same, to 1,388 to change to the commission manager form, and going from 4-year terms to 2-year terms. All happened at that time, according to our records, unless you know something different. Then in 94 to 96, what did you do then? Did you do anything? You studied and put something on the ballot to go to a charter form of government, and the voters rejected that at 1492 to stay the same to 1390. So what is that, 98 votes shy of adopting a charter form of government. And then, did you do one? You didn't do this. So 2004. Missoula, where am I at here? Livingston, manager with a charter. Yeah, and that lost again more soundly at little more than 500 votes shy. 1692 to 1056 for the charter form self-governing powers. So that's your history. Like I said, in the last time, I think in 2014 to 16, you didn't voted not to, so the voters chose not to do it. So every year or every 10 years up until this last 10-year cycle, you had done something and proposed something. So any questions so far? That's kind of the foundation. And then we'll get into, I think I want to get into then the different forms of government. I've not drank enough water, as my watch informs me. All right, so now I want to talk about power, form, and plan. So this is something that is what kind of the crux of the invitation here is to talk about the powers, form, and plan. What are you today, and what are the options or alternatives that you can choose from? And then, if you chose to change or to make a modification, how would that process be? And we can talk about the merits of each of these things, right? What are the trade-offs? Because all of it's a trade-off, and oftentimes it's an opportunity for a community to sit back and look and reflect at how are things working for us today, and could things be better with a change? Not for the sake of change, but is there an opportunity or something, or we're anticipating future opportunities that we're letting pass by because we're not positioning ourselves today to seize or to take advantage of future opportunities, just because we can't be as nimble as we might like to be given said opportunity that might arise. And that's a logic that several communities have used in changing their form of government over the past. So I want to start out with the discussion around powers. There are two powers available to local governments, so cities and counties. This is options for cities and counties. Two powers that are available. One of them, general governing powers. So we will add general. General governing powers means that, and this is what you are currently operating with now in the city of Livingston, is that you can only exercise those powers that are granted to you by the legislature or the Constitution. Right? If it doesn't say in the Montana Code annotated that you can do this, the assumption is that you cannot. Right? And that's where you're operating right now. So if it's not in Title 7 or Title 76 or Title 13 or Title whatever, if it doesn't say that you can, as a local government, exercise this authority or power, the assumption is you cannot. Okay? The other option is self-governing powers. And in the state of Montana, what that means is that you can exercise any power that's not prohibited by the law, the Constitution, or your local charter if you have one. So if it doesn't expressly say, thou shalt not do this, the assumption is that you can. Now, just to be clear, the legislature has pretty much taken all the fun things you might want to do off the table. so there are some opportunities and advantages to that self-governing power over general governing powers for those communities that would like to pursue that. But some of the things that you think, ooh, this might be a way to solve some of our local problems, there may be a chance that that's been a power denied you. So those are the two different powers, right? Those powers expressly granted to you by the legislature, or all powers except for those that are denied. Right now, you're operating with general governing powers. All right, now to talk about the form of government. There are 6 different forms of government I'm going to review. And each has its own merits, each has its own place, and you need to decide what fits best for you, particularly now, but also looking into the future. So the first I'm going to talk about is the commission executive. And that's what you had back in 1984 when you started this process at the voter review and then voted to go, is it 84, right? 86 is when it changed to, yeah, 86. So the commission executive form or the council mayor form of government, where you have an elected commission or legislative body and an elected mayor. Okay. The mayor executes. Now let's just do another review here. What is the role of the executive branch? What are they to do? Okay. Execute, right? Execute what? Policy. So the things that are adopted by the legislative branch. Now the legislative branch meets together and they decide what are the policies and what are the ordinances and laws and how do we govern our community. When they make a decision, then it's up to the executive to then make sure that that's followed through on. There's a reason why the legislative branch doesn't have any staff, right? The staff is under the executive branch. They're the ones there, police department, fire department, they've got a public works department. So all the policies that you're adopting are then being administered by the executive branch. So think of the governor and the cabinet, right? Department of whatever, that's the cabinet. So think of the cabinet of a local government would be the public works department, the clerk's office, the planning department, or whatever you decide would be your cabinet, right? The department heads. That would be the executive branch. So they need the resources and tools to execute those policies that are adopted by the legislative branch. Judicial branch, I'm just going to ignore them because it's complicated. Not complicated, but basically it's scripted out in statute. You don't have a lot of flexibility in fiddling with that. So you just kind of do your thing and let it do its thing. It's like the third rail. I don't want to talk about it. Unless you really want to talk about it, we can talk about it, but it's really just there. It doesn't play into the forms of government. Really, the forms of government are really defining this relationship here. All right. The next one I'm going to talk about is the commission manager form. You have an elected commission, legislative body, and then based on knowledge, skill, and experience, the commission hires a manager who then executes or manages or executes the policies and ordinances of the legislative body. So the only difference is this is an employee of the commission or the council, where this is and works for and under the direction of the commission, right? Where in this relationship, they are two co-equal branches. The mayor does not work for the council, and the council does not work for the mayor. They have to collaborate and get along together. Okay, so it's subtly and slightly different. So the manager then, based on knowledge, skill, and experience, is hired. Think of school board and superintendent of schools, right? Same thing. You don't, hopefully, you're not having school board members in classrooms evaluating teachers. That's not their role. Their role is to create budget and look at the high picture of what's going on in the school district. How do we create a system that's going to educate our youth in our community? That's what they're concerned about. And then once they make those big policy decisions, the school board or the superintendent then executes that. They're making sure they're hiring the right teachers, they're evaluating the teachers, making sure they're meeting the criteria that's been established by the school board, right? Similar to the city manager, high level by the commission, and then it's executed by the manager. All right, the next one is going to be the commission form. Now, where do we see the commission form of government most common in the state? Counties. Counties operate with the commission form of government. Do you notice we have a blank over here? So who is the executive branch for the county? The commission. They are the legislative branch and the executive branch rolled into the same governing body. They make the laws and then turn around and have to execute the laws, make sure that they're carried out and delivered, executed, whatever they might be. So they're all in one group, all in one house. What else I want to say about them? There's 2 communities in the state of Montana that operate. No, I take that back. Not this group. There's no communities or municipalities that operate with this form of government. I think that's right. All almost 54 of our counties operate that way. The exception would be Butte, Silver Bow, and Anaconda Deer Lodge. They operate with the commission executive form. They have an elected CEO and elected commission. The next one would be the commission presiding officer. So the presiding officer, the executive in this form of government, is a member of the commission. What happens is the commission, once they're elected, will then, from their own body, those commissioners elect one of their own members to serve as the presiding officer or / the mayor of the community. So they retain all of their legislative responsibilities and duties as a legislator, but then have the added responsibility to then execute whatever decisions are being made. And in this case, we have 2 communities in the state that operate with that form of government. Out of the 127 municipalities, 2 operate with that form of government. And then finally, which I'll just mention, it's not an option for you, it's the town meeting form of government. And this is only available to communities that have a population of 2,000 or less. And this is our true direct democracy, where the legislative body is the electorate. So at least once a year, they need to have a meeting where the community comes together and they pass ordinances, pass the budget, and those types of things. Only one community in the state operates with a town meeting form of government, and that would be Pinesdale in the Bitterroot Valley down by Hamilton. All right. Any questions on the forms of government? That's right. And there's going to be a quiz. All right. Correct. The last form, and I'm going to do this one a little bit. The last form, and do this a little bit different. And that's going to be over here, different color. The charter form of government. Now, I'm writing this in green. I'm putting it off to the side. It's a little bit different. I'm going to make a mark all over me here. The charter form of government is it's only an option for those local governments that adopt self-governing powers. Okay, if you don't have self-governing powers, it's not an option to you. However, if you had self-governing powers, you could adopt any one of these forms of government as scripted in the legislature or in the Montana Code Annotated. It has a recipe, and we'll discuss the recipe here in a minute, has a recipe for each one of these. And you can choose any one of these options, and you can choose sub-options within those options to define what your government looks like. There's a lot of flexibility in these existing forms of government spelled out in the Montana Code Annotated. The charter, however, is a little bit different. It's a little more unique, and what that is it's think of your own local constitution, where you sit down and write out, this is the legislative branch, this is their roles and responsibilities, this is their term of office, this is who's eligible to run, here is the executive branch, this is what they do, what their responsibilities are, what the departments that might exist. So you write out what your plan of government is going to be in your charter, and that's what governs your locality. It can be very specific, or it can be very broad and general. As of late, most of the charters that have been written have been formulated around an existing form of government. They have just chosen a sub-option and said, that's the one we're going to put into our charter. So it looks very similar to what is spelled out in the Montana Code, but it's written into their charter. That allows them to have the same feel, right? The same feel as any other, like you could adopt a charter and have it essentially look exactly like it is today. The only difference is you have a charter that governs you and self-governing powers. And your form or you could be like Bozeman and just spin it all up, right? If you've noticed, Bozeman's, they have an election where their mayor, they run for mayor, and the first 2 years of their term, they're deputy mayor. Last 2 years of their 4-year term, they are the mayor. And then if that mayor wants to run again, they have to run as as a mayor, but they'll be elected 2 years deputy mayor to mayor. So you never have the same mayor more than 2 years at a time. Does that make sense? They have they have used some creativity in how they define the back up. They do not have the commission executive form of government. That is a figurehead position. They're still a legislator with certain executive responsibilities. We could talk more about their example if you wanted to. They're really commission manager, but that role of the mayor and how they're elected is defined in their charter, is my point. Does that make sense? Is anyone confused yet? Because I could do this much worse. It is possible. But if you're all good, does that make sense? Now, I've got a slug of handouts and references and resources to review. Don't want that one. Oh, this is what I want to do. So I have two handouts, and I'll explain one, and then the other handout, you can infer how to read it. So you probably have it in your
Yeah,
packet.
yeah.
Oh, you might have it. So it's the one that says commission manager form of government. And what I'll do, if you all have it in your packets, what I'll do is if the public, you want one here? Take that one, Tom. So folks in public, I'll just put that here. You can come grab your own. Oh, I'm going to need one myself. Thank you. Yep, there we go. All right. So, oh, you have it as you can project it. Oh, look at you fancy folks. Working on technology. Oh, yes, there we go. Hey, well, let's do this one. We can do this one too. I've got that handout also. It's the same idea. You needed one?
Yes, please. Thank you.
I need one. We'll throw this out to the. So, let me see now. I need to speak in here. All right. So the legislature, what they did is they said, right, we're going to, for those with general governing powers, right, if you have general governing powers, we're going to provide for you what we like to call at the center a recipe, right? We're going to provide for you a recipe that's going to give you a variety of options that you can choose from when you do your voter review. But when you start out in 1974 to 76, the very first voter review, they pre-selected for you a variety of self-options, of sub-options. Does that make sense? They went through and said, you've got a lot of options, but we're going to pre-select certain options for you. So you start out with the existing form of government, this is what you are. And then you can choose and modify from there. Okay? So if you look here on, which one do you have up there? Executive Commission, executive form of government. You see that list there that it says, look, before 1977, blah, 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 this is who you are. And if you look down here at just say 73213, right? You just scrolled past it, but that's okay. Right, yeah. So see there, in that list, 73213, and what's this in parentheses? What number does it say in the parentheses? 3. So that tells me that there is more. Is that a hand up? Okay. There's more than there's at least 3 options. So let's turn to 73213. And you'll notice at 73213, number 3, that was up there in that list of statutes, is in bold. I put the bold in there. Okay, that's to indicate, you're welcome, that's to indicate which is the statutory default. You with me? It's the statutory default. So legislature said, here's your default, but there's several other options. So let's just look at that default and the other sub options. If you look at 73213, supervision of personnel. Now this is the commission executive form of government, the mayor council form of government. It says the executive, and who's the executive? The mayor, right? The elected mayor. In this case, the executive may, number 1 option is appoint and remove all employees of local government. Okay, that's one of the options. That gives the mayor a tremendous amount of influence and power, doesn't it? They can appoint and remove anyone in the local government. Lots of power to the mayor. Number 2, appoint and remove with the consent of the majority commission all employees of the local government. Ooh, That's a little bit different. Takes some of that power away from the mayor, and you can only hire and fire individuals in the city with the consent of the commission, which to me makes personnel discussions and personnel decisions political, right? Okay, I have issues with that one. The third option, which is in bold, which is the default option the legislature pre-selected. Now, if you think about a range, right? On one side, appoint and remove all employees. To the other side, appoint and remove with consent of the commission. And what the legislature said, let's split the difference between those two extremes. And let's say appoint with the consent of the majority of the commission all department heads, and remove department heads, and may appoint and remove all other department employees. Which they're saying there is, all right, we're going to have the two of you, we want you to collaborate between these two branches of the government on the appointment of department heads, because that's the cabinet. We want to make sure we all agree and have consensus between the two branches of government on who we're going to have running these departments. Police chief, fire chief, public works clerk, parks director, those types of decisions. But then after that, the mayor can hire and dismiss all the other employees. Based on what? Based on the policy adopted by the commission. Does that make sense? So the role the commission plays then is adopting an HR policy that then the executive, whether it's the mayor or the city manager, then has to apply that policy in the management of personnel. Does that make sense? So as you read all of these, so there, veto power. Number 2 is highlighted. That's the default. Veto ordinances and resolutions subject to an override of 2/3 vote of the commission. And you can see the other options, right? So the third option, we don't give the mayor any veto power, right? You must sign all, like the executive today here in Livingston. The manager does not have veto power, right? So he just executes. He's not a political body. Where in this case, the mayor is a political body and has a voice in this. And so they have to work out, again, they have to work out through the veto process how we're going to settle on some of these ordinances and resolutions we decide. Does that make sense? So that's when we have these concentrics or these this Venn diagram with these overlapping circles demonstrates, at least in this case, the expectation the legislature has for us to get along. Something to think about. In the state of Montana, we had 127 municipalities. Of those 127, the last time I counted, it might be different now, about 77 of them, 77 of 127 have less than 500 residents. Pretty small, right? So this really works where, look, figure it out. Get together, figure out how you're going to govern your community. Right? We're not going to give way too much power to one side or the other. So they've split the difference in all of these powers. So there's no extreme side or the other side. There's an expectation we're going to get along here in the state of Montana. All right. So the manager side, now you have the ability to pull that up. It's the same concept where the highlighted sections represent the default. There's something I want to point out here. So look at 73305, middle of second page. Employees of commission manager government, right? The form of government that you're in. Employees appointed by the manager and the manager's subordinates must be administratively responsible to the manager, right? The commission doesn't have any say in the management of employees day to day. What's the number 2? Neither the commission nor any of its members may dictate the appointment or removal of any employee whom the manager or any of the manager's subordinates are empowered to appoint. No veto power here, no consent. They have empowered the manager to make these decisions. You have hired a professional and you're going to provide with him or her the resources they need to administer. And the way you manage that is through your HR policy. You define and what jobs are going to be available, what you're going to fund, but really you're not going to be dictating the operations. That's the executive branch, how we're going to do the operations. Except for the purpose of inquiry or investigation under this title, the commission or its members shall deal with the local government employees who are subject to the direction of the supervision of the manager solely through the manager. And neither the commission nor its members may give orders to employees either publicly or privately. That's the law. It would be inconsistent with the law for one of these commissioners to pull over the public works director and say, oh, hey, by the way, there's a pothole down on D Street. I really think you need to go patch that. And they'd say, thanks for your input. Drive away, right? Because the manager may have given that individual different directions for that day. And they're not going to stop and follow what the direction, because you would be considered like any other citizen. They'd log it and put it in the list of things that need to be done, but don't have the expectation that the staff are going to jump to your request or recommendation. You make the recommendation here in this meeting to the manager, and the manager figures out, how am I going to do this? Does that make sense? So that's how you read these two documents to understand the difference between a commission manager and a commission executive. You're operating right now, as far as my records indicate, as a default commission manager form of government. So all the highlighted ones in this section, the commission manager form of government, would be consistent with the way you're operating here today. Yeah. I don't want to open that can of worms. There's, well, 73314. Have you found where you officially changed that? It's a partisan, nonpartisan elections.
No, we haven't changed that. We're still nonpartisan.
Okay.
Nonpartisan's default, right? Yeah, we're still default.
For your form of government, the default is nonpartisan. For the commission executive or mayor council, the default is partisan. So most municipalities in the state do not have partisan elections. Regardless, most of them have either changed it or just ignore it. It's kind of fun. City of Havre, just a little story for you. City of Havre tried to change it. They said, we've been operating with nonpartisan elections from time beginning, and it says partisan. So we're actually going to make that legit, and we're going to put that on the ballot, and we're going to try to, comply with the law. And the voters rejected it, forcing them then to have partisan elections. Didn't go over well. And about 10 years after that, they put it back in the ballot, and it, like 70% said, yeah, we don't want to do that. That was not a good idea. So anyway, those are some things that are happening around the state. Are there any questions about this? Oh, one of the things that you changed, and I should have looked up ahead of time, because you were elected, the terms of office, 73318 shall be elected to 4-year terms, and you've changed that to 2-year terms. Is that correct?
We changed it back to 4.
Oh, you're back to 4.
Yeah.
There you go. Even better. See how, so, and here's another thing. City or the county of Madison County, when they did this voter review in 1974 to 76, they adopted commission manager form of government and a charter. I'm sorry, commission executive form of government and a charter. They went from the commission form, 3 commissioners, to a mayor and council and a charter form of government. Wow. Too progressive for them. About 6 years later, they put it back in the ballot and changed back to the default general governing powers and commission form of government. So that happened. Yes, ma'am.
2004, we went from 2 to 4-year terms. That's the year we.
You switched back, yeah, because you switched from 4 to 2 and back to 4. Oh, was it 3? Okay. Good. Yep, and overlapping, yeah. So there you sit, right? So these are your options. And so part of this is a discussion within the community, right? What is what we have today working for us in the current form? Are we okay with the form, but maybe we want to adopt self-governing powers, right? I was going to draw this here. Right. So maybe we want to go with a charter. Maybe we like the form of government as it's spelled out. We just want to do self-governing powers. Or do we want to adopt self-governing powers in a charter and then scramble this up a little bit. So you've got a lot of opportunity and flexibility. Now, the way to change that, you have a couple options. This one I don't think I gave you. You can change it 3 different ways. One is through the study commission. You just wait every 10 years. So it's coming up in 2024, right? It's on your calendar. It's on my calendar. Oh my goodness, it's on my calendar. 2024 to 2026 is the next opportunity you have to vote on the question, do we want to study our existing form of government? And at that point, if you get a majority of the community say, yeah, we do, then you elect study commissioners who then sit down and look at what are the benefits and drawbacks of this? What are the opportunities that might present themselves with these different forms? And then the plan of government, basically the plan is all the highlighted sections here. That's your plan, right? Strip out all the other options, you boil it down, that is your plan of government. So that's the opportunity. That's one option. Another option is the commission, by ordinance, can place the question on the ballot. Do you want to adopt an alternative form of government or stay with your existing form of government? Right? That would be the administrative way how you get it on the ballot. So the power exists within the commission to place that question on the ballot. Now, how you go about deciding what you want to put on the ballot is entirely up to you. You could impanel your own study commission, a commission of residents. You sit down and say, okay, we want you to study all of this, make a recommendation back to us, and then we'll put that on the ballot. Or another option would be a petition where the citizens can get together and they say, we would like to petition and place the question on the ballot to adopt some alternative form of government. So those are the options that are available to you to change your form of government. So you can wait till 2024. You can decide, and I was just having this conversation with one of the large metro communities that are kind of fiddling with the idea where residents are, and it got to a point where the commission said, well, maybe we need to talk about this and learn a little more about it. So I came and did the same spiel with them. And I think the commission, regardless of what the people thought, we're going to wait till 2024. We don't have the bandwidth to deal with this right now on our plates. Unless the public wants to petition, then it's out of our control, or we'll wait to 2024. The only caveat on that discussion for them was if they were to have their own study commission, they can shape and frame the discussion and put some sideboards on it. If the commission doesn't do that and they leave it to a petition process in the community, you're going to get whatever the community wants to come up with, which may or may not be representative of the whole community. It might just be a small faction of the community that says, yeah, we want this thing. And it may not necessarily be something that the commission feels comfortable with, but it's not up to you at this point. It's the public process. So my advice was to them is to get out ahead of it and define what's the sideboards of what you want to consider moving forward, and give a charge to a community, a group of residents to study this, come up with some recommendations that we would like to move forward with. So anyway, so that's the political side of that. Anything else? So I have this handout, and as you notice, these are all the Montana Code annotated. I only have one handout where we kind of took this and put it in regular people speak, but partly I want to make sure that you see what everyone else sees. This is what the law says and how to go about it so that there's no ambiguity. Well, there's certainly ambiguity here, but at least we're all messed up over the same statute. That makes sense. There's that one. Oh, you got that handout. Good. There's that one. So I'll entertain questions now if you have any. If there was something that I said that was unclear, I'd be happy to clarify that. I could start all over again. I could, like I said, like John, I could do this all night long. I don't have a flight in the morning, so and I don't know if you want to just be amongst the commission first and have some structure to this.
Yes, yes,
We like
Um,
structure.
yes. Commissioners, do you want to start with any questions?
Yeah, this came up about 8 years ago when we were talking about a charter. And the comments from the commissioners and the people that I heard, we don't want to do the charter because it gives the manager too much power. Are they missing something there?
The charter, you define the power of the manager. So it doesn't give them any more power than the people are willing to give.
I thought.
Yeah.
Didn't understand it.
Apparently, yeah. So we have on our website all the charters that exist in the state. You can find on our website. So you can read them. You can read what Butte and Silverbow, Anaconda Deer Lodge, City of Shoto, Billings, Bozeman. You can read all their charters, and they're all a little bit different. There's some of the smaller municipalities have pretty much the boilerplate. They just take these highlighted sections on the recipe, migrated into their charter, and they said, we're comfortable with this form of government. We're comfortable with the form of government we have. We like the idea of having a charter and self-government powers. It makes us more nimble to be responsive to opportunities that might present themselves to us. Right? And so we can act in a way because we have that. We don't have to wait for the legislature to see fit to give us a certain power that we would have to wait with general governing powers. So it allows you that chance to say, hey, there's a chance we can do this. Or there's an issue that comes up in our community that we say, gosh, I'd love to deal with it, but we don't have the power. I was in a community the other day that they said, we would love to be able to deal with the vacant homes in our community. We have a lot of vacant homes. They're an attractive nuisance. They have problems with people breaking in. It creates a lot of hassle for our law enforcement. And it's causing a strain on our local budget. So they wanted to create an ordinance that would have an assessment for an abandoned home, a home that is not lived in, and that the owner would have to pay this assessment, which would go to increase patrol and assessment or security of these homes. They couldn't enact that ordinance to be able to collect the fee. They could enact an ordinance, but is what the loan owners would do because they can't force them to pay, which means if they don't pay, they could put the fine or the fee on their taxes. They don't have the power to do that, which takes all the guts out of the law for enforcement. So it just be an ordinance in name only. No one's going to do anything about it. And so that was a frustration for that community. They said, well, how do we then have the power to deal with this issue that's unique to us? And we can't go to the legislature and say, hey, give us this extra power, because they're going to say, yeah, it's not generally applied across the state. It doesn't make sense for us to create a new power just for you. You have the option, figure it out locally. Right? So they're having this similar conversation too. It's like, okay, there are certain things we're starting to see now. We're leaving stuff on the table that we can't access or seize because we're hampered by our powers that we have. I don't know, so got a little excited there.
Did Haver do that?
That's, yeah. So Haver, Haver was the community. They were looking at Butte Silverbow's ordinance and said, we want to do that. Well, Butte Silverbow has what? They have a charter and self-governing powers. And Haver has general governing powers. And so there was the rub. And so now they've had on the ballot too the adoption of self-governing powers, but the public could never see tangibly, well, what difference does that make? Now they're starting to see, now the ability to be nimble, they've got to wait till either 2024 or get the energy within a community to do a ballot or a petition or convince the council that this is something that we want to do. Off cycle of the 10-year cycle. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Could you give us a pro and con, just from your experiences and from your knowledge, on some of the other forms of government? Because, well,
Yeah.
step it back one, I guess. When you're dealing with the review process, you can do the review process and look at charter forms of government versus general. You can also do the commission versus executive, and you can do all of it all at the same time. You can review and look at
Yep.
the whole picture.
All on the table. Yeah.
So give me a pro, or give us some pros and
Yeah.
cons of the commission, say executive.
Yeah.
What are some of the
Yeah.
problems or good things that have come of it? And then if you add in the charter, what may be the result of
Yeah.
of that? Because that has been one of the conversations that
That you're having?
people what have mentioned that they can. It's mostly on Facebook. I'll say that I haven't had people come to me generally,
Yeah.
but having a commission manager, mayor, charter
Yeah.
form of government.
So looking at the differences between the commission executive and the commission manager form of government, you've got to think about the context of your community. Where are you in the growth of your community, and what's the existing capacity that exists here? So, for example, there was another similar sized community. The story was that there was a. This is my version of the story. May or may not be accurate. I don't know. And I'm sure it depends on who you talk to. But there was a subdivision on the edge of town that they petitioned the city when that subdivision went in to get city sewer and water. And they said, great, we will provide you those services, but you have to waive your right to protest when it comes time to annex. We're not ready to annex you right now, but when it comes time, we're going to annex you, and will have to waive your right to protest that annexation. Well, that happened, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. So lots of homes turned over. So the original people that said, yeah, we want the water and sewer, right? Sold their home. And now the commission decided it's time. It's time to proceed to annexation. We've gotten to the point where we're going to have them part of the fold. Directed the manager to go through the process of annexation. Those landowners, homeowners, were upset because they loved, as I would say, being freeloaders. We're getting all the access to the services, but we don't have to pay a dime for city municipal taxes. This is the best of both worlds. And they were very upset when they were told that they could not protest this. They said, well, I didn't make that decision. Some previous person, I have a right. Well, to be clear, the Supreme Court has made that very clear. You have no right. That is it goes as a covenant on that property. You don't have a right to protest if you waived your right to protest in the past. Goes with the land. So they were upset. So who could they go after? Who did they villainize? The manager, because he was the one doing all the work. And so in several meetings, I was there probably half a dozen times in this community, and they were saying, but the manager, we need to go back to a mayor form of government, because that mayor is going to be accountable to us. We can vote that mayor out. And I said, why do you have a beef with the manager and or mayor? Does the manager make any decisions on their own? No. The manager acts at the behest of, or request of, or direction of, executes what the legislative body asked. The council said, we want to annex. So the manager is just doing that. So they thought they could stop the process of annexation if they changed their form of government and had an elected mayor who would then be fearful of executing the annexation for fear of getting bounced out of office. So that was that. They put it on the ballot and it lost. They stuck with their city manager, but by like 1 or 2 points, 1 or 2 votes. So one of the downsides, or one of the things I would challenge you, and I would challenge you as a community to think about when you think about the commission manager or the commission executive, having an elected mayor. What's your budget here? What's your total budget for the city? $16, $17 million. Do you have any other business in town that operates with a budget that big? Hospital? Okay. Is a hospital run by an elected hospital administrator that you all get together and elect the administrator? No. They've hired a professional, right? School? You hire a professional to run the school? So think about in your community, do we have the human capital in this community? And how many employees? You got about 100 employees? 100 employees, 100-ish employees, and you got a $16 million budget. Do we have anybody in this town that's willing to run for office that has the capacity to manage your tax dollars to provide you essential services you have no other way to get? Water, sewer, transportation, public service, public safety, fire. And you're going to leave that up to one of your neighbors? I was a mayor of a small town. Scary, huh? They elected me to take care of those essential services. They had no other way of getting access to those services except through our local government. So think about that, right? Are you going to want to elect someone that has the capacity, the knowledge, the experience to manage a $60 million budget and 100 employees to provide those essential services from somebody that's willing to put their name on a ballot and go through that hassle of being publicly assailed day in and day out, right? Think about that. So if you don't feel like you got a long line of people saying, yeah, give that job to me, then maybe the best idea is to stay with the city manager. I'm just getting too old, right? No, I'm not holding my punches. So there's a tipping point within a community that it works well for these smaller rural communities. I was the mayor of a small rural community, 1,600 people. It worked well for us. We had 14 employees and a $2 million budget when we had big water sewer projects, right? Other than that, our general fund, our tax dollars was about $250,000. I could manage that. I can deal with it. I had the capacity to deal with that. And I had really smart staff, right? That we hired good people based on their knowledge, skill, and experience to help us through that. But you get up to Bozeman. Now, I will say, Missoula has an elected mayor, right? They're at risk, right? It's a political appointment. And Missoula has a lot of politics. You can get someone in there that may not have the capacity to deal with what Missoula has. So right now they have what I would consider a very competent, capable person who's running the city of Missoula. But what's just below him is a CAO, a chief administrative officer, who does the day-to-day operations. He has a professional that they pay that professional just what you'd pay for a city manager. So they have an elected mayor who's taking a decent salary because he's doing a lot of work, but they also have a CAO who's doing a lot of work. It's not necessarily a cheaper option for you, but if you want to have a well-run, sophisticated organization that's going to be anticipating the future, making sure you're making good decisions, that you're not getting behind the 8 ball on your capital investments and your planning and making decisions, bringing people in to help make decisions on your future, are you going to rely upon somebody who's also running the hardware store and does this as a part-time gig? In case one of you are hardware store owners, I don't want to make you feel bad, but that's kind of the reality. So I think, can you tell there's a little bit of passion there? I think there is a tipping point in the community that it gets to the point where, yeah, we need a manager. And there's a couple of them out there like that. Havre, similar in size, 9,000 people. They have had that conversation several times.
What's the logic of having both the mayor and the
CAO? Well, the logic is we have a couple communities, and I'll say that we have a couple communities like Missoula that are smaller that have a CAO. Glendive. Next to Billings, Laurel. Thank you. Just looking at you, Mel. Help me come up with that. Laurel, Glendive, they have a mayor. So they have a mayor that's political, that's responsive to the people, that knows he's got to keep people happy. He has to be out there reaching out to the public, making sure they're hearing their needs, but then has someone who has the capacity to administer the day-to-day operations. So you've got the best of both worlds, but it's not necessarily a cheaper alternative.
So it's like a PR slot.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So they're still doing, and they still are, they're still, the buck stops with them. They still have to be on the ballot. They still have to be accountable to the people, but they also recognize that we've gotten sophisticated and complicated enough that we need to have that professional support to help us. Yeah, and if your mayor is taking a large salary, and yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Hmm.
One of the conversations I've heard in the community has been, since the mayor's elected in that form of government, therefore, this is a statement some folks that were making in the community. If they're elected, therefore, all the meetings they attend are subject to the sunshine laws. Can you clarify?
Yeah, they're not. To be clear, that the sunshine laws apply to the legislative branch where the decision, the policies are being made. The mayor is not a legislative body. They're not a decision-making body. They're an executing body. And so there was anybody from the press here? It's going to be taking pictures. I figured you were. So there was some newspaper, and I don't remember where the town was, that they were wanting to be in on a meeting between the mayor, the city engineer, the Public Works Department, and they're having a meeting about some sort of public works project. And the press want to be present, saying that is a meeting that we should have a right to attend. And the court said no, because it's not a deliberative body. They're not making any decisions that the public has to. They are executing the decision that was already made by the legislative body. So they are not a decision maker. They execute. Same with the manager as the executive branch. So the mayor or the manager, they're unless it's you, is where the sunshine laws apply to the commission, because you're the ones that are making decisions on behalf of the community. And so we need to get your input, right? You have a constitutional right to comment prior to final action, which you open the meeting with. Is there any public comment on the agenda, right? So when the manager or mayor or whomever, the executive branch goes out in the community having meetings, they're not subject to open meeting laws. Now, no reason why you wouldn't want to advertise them and make sure the public's there, but yeah, that they're not, because it's the legislative body. There's no quorum, right? When there's no established body. There is an established body with a quorum. That's when you have a meeting. Oh, I could go down a rabbit hole again if you want, but is that sufficient? Oh, okay, rabbit hole. You asked. There are, oh man. Don't look. That didn't get on the, now it's going to go on to YouTube now. All right, there are, just to be, this is probably helpful for you folks. There are 6 criteria, or 5, depending on how my list looks like, that constitutes a public meeting. What needs to be in place in order to have a public meeting? Okay, so a meeting, you need a quorum. What else? An agenda. Notice. Minutes. Yes, a little early on that one, but yes. There's one other I want to do here. There's public comment, because it works better this way. So then it's, and then the law, it defines what a meeting is, and it says anytime a quorum gets together of the constituent members to hear, discuss, or act. Yes, I highlighted and put in green the or. Why? What's so significant about that 2-letter word or that helps us understand that statement? To hear, discuss, or act, rather than and act. Any one of the 3 would constitute a meeting. So if you have a quorum, should I do another color? Racy. If you have a quorum that is hearing, discussing, or acting, you then have a meeting that must have an agenda, notice, minutes, and public comment. Right? So it's a deliberative body. It doesn't apply to an executive in this case, because there is no quorum. They're a body politic unto themselves. But another way to think about this, to call a special meeting, right? If there is a need to call a special meeting, how, in between meetings, how would a city council member or a commissioner call a special meeting on their own? Because as a council member, you have, well, I should ask this question differently. What power does a council member have? Yeah. As an individual, they have no power. Their power comes from the collective. And then you only have a vote, right? Thus, that's why you can't direct staff to do things, because you have no power. The power you have is when you are in this setting, then you have power, and a majority agrees to do something, to discuss or act on something, right? So think about that then. If you are a single council member and there is a need for a public meeting that you need to call a special meeting, you don't have the power. And in order to have the power by convening a quorum, what are you doing? You're convening a quorum without proper notice, right? So you get into this catch-22. Thus, the calling of a special meeting, that power resides with the executive branch. That is an executive function. Unless the council in a meeting that meets all this criteria says, oh, there's a need for us to meet next week before the grant application's due or whatever to sign off on it. let's call a special meeting. Then you can, right, without public notice, this can just come up because this is what they call administrative act. By calling a special meeting, because the actual final action will take place at the meeting you call, thus allowing public comment to take place then. That makes sense. I hope it does, because if to explain it again would be exactly the same words as I just did. So just think about that. So when you're trying to deliberate about these things, right? There's sometimes people think about stuff that's like, well, that doesn't really apply with the way the system works. And so there are red herrings that create, and that's where I think there's a lot of the challenge in trying for the public to deliberate on some of these issues, is there's all this misinformation that gets stirred up and makes the water very muddy. And when people aren't clear about the outcome because of all the misinformation, what is their default vote? No. It's easier to say no because I don't understand the consequences of this because there's so much stuff flying around. Thus, I'm like Johnny Appleseed running around the state saying, it's not that hard. This is what it looks like, right? So just deliberate on these things. So back to your original question. That helps a little bit, I think, between these. Some of these, I would think they're going to be a little problematic for you to do some of these others. That's why I say there's only 2 that operate, and they're very small. Broadview, probably a population of 117 people operates with the commission presiding officer, and then Virginia City. Yeah. So those 2 operate with commission presiding officer. There's no municipality that operates with the commission form of government. It makes sense in the county level. Counties are a subdivision of state government. They are established to deliver state services on a local level. That's why the entire state is covered by, well, I'm in Park County. 99.99% of the state is covered by a county, because you guys keep telling me there's a little strip down above the park that is not part of your county, but it's within the state. Whatever. That's a whole thing going on, you guys, whatever. But the whole state's covered. So every citizen of the state of Montana is a resident of a county. Thus, the state can deliver its services through the county, the local delivery mechanism. They don't have a tremendous amount of power. Municipalities have more power. I was going to say way more, but they have more power to make decisions locally. They have more power to be self-determined. Counties are more of an administrative arm of the state on the local level. It's a way to look at it. So if you're trying to say, well, why can't the county, why didn't the city, blah, 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 they're different. They're different animals. Their function, purpose are different. And there's a lot more power and influence on the local level in municipalities. Got me all fired up now, folks.
Any other questions, commissioners? We need to open the floor for some public questions. We don't have everything set up. Normally we don't. Is
Okay.
there, not during scheduled public comment.
You want me to hang around in case people have questions during public
That would
comment?
be
Would that be
great.
working your system?
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
So I can do that. And I guess I'll just wrap up saying the opportunity is yours. And I think part of it is, if you want to drill down on this, we have a lot of resources to help you start figuring out in more detail, like this book here. This is about the voter review process and the history of it in the state of Montana, what changes have been taking place, but also it explains the different forms and everything in the government. We have several resources if you want to drill down and have that conversation as a community. What opportunities present themselves given the context of who we are today, but also thinking out in the future. Remember, you could do this every 10 years. Think about what it was like in Sidney, Montana 5-6 years ago. Remember what it was like in Sidney, Montana 5 or 6 years ago? It was crazy, right? The Bakken was going full gangbusters. They were overwhelmed with their current form of government as the mayor, commission executive form of government. The mayor they had at the time was busy trying to make a living, and he didn't, it was just a hard time for them. It would have been a great time for them to have had a commission manager form of government where they had a professional to deal with this stuff, 60 hours a week, instead of a guy that, had a business on the side. He's trying to keep his family fed and deal with the issues that are exploding all around him in the Bakken. right? So that's, I think, the idea of our legislature creating this opportunity for us that when things change, or if you're looking out in the future saying, you know what, it might be better for us to do blah, blah, blah than our current form. And we can project out and see what that might look like. And the flexibility is yours, right? Some states, this is not even an option. It is what it is. And the legislature tells you what you are and when to change. It's an act of the legislature to make those changes. And so we're very fortunate in Montana to have this, what I'd say, small p progressive constitution allows us to be reflective in our communities, what makes sense for us, that we don't have to wait for Helena to decide what's best for us, that we can decide what's best for us.
So what would be the downside of the self-governing?
I haven't found one yet. There's, for some, it's not really that much of an upside either. Those that have it say, we've never really capitalized on it, but we know that if there's an opportunity that presents itself, then we can seize it. And that's where, and in the 2004 to 2006, that was a big wave of small municipalities that adopted charter form of government. We have about 34 in the state that have charter form of government. And that was I think, a wave at that time when they started thinking about, if we wanted to own our own windmills and generate power that would offset the cost of our streetlights. Your streetlight bill in this city, I can only imagine, over $1 million.
It's around 750,000 a year.
So $750,000, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the wind blows around here, right? So what if this, yeah. So that, it's just thinking creatively, right? But right now, that is not an option for you if you wanted to own your own public utility. The law does not allow the city with general governing powers to have its own public utility, like an electric utility. City of Troy has their own. They have a hydroelectric dam, and it generates electricity. They have their own city-owned power system. Saco, the town of Saco, has self-governing powers and a charter, and they have their own natural gas utility. They have city-owned natural gas wells along the High Line that they generate gas and they deliver it to their citizens. They can't do that. They wouldn't be able to do that if they had general governing powers, right? So as you start thinking more creatively about how do we solve some of our unique problems that either are unique to you or just the declining revenues over time, it's like, well, how do we generate more revenue? What opportunities we have? Yeah, okay, so you do the math. Oh, yeah. Wow. What's my webpage? msulocalgov.org. Oh, that's it. msulocalgov.org. On the very front section, it should have a little section there that says charters, and you can click on it. It has all the city charters. All right. So I'll leave my mess here and sit down and clean up after. How's that? This one? Yeah. This is Montana's Local Government Review. Ken L. Weaver and Judith A. Mathery are the authors. This you can find on the MSU Extension bookstore. And there's several other resources at that site that you can access that help understand local government better.
Thank you, Dan. Very informative. A little bit crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
It's what you're hoping for, right?
Yes, we like that. Whenever you come and present it.
Dancing with the stars.
It is. So please ask questions of Dan at the end of the meeting, because we are going to fly through the next part of the meeting, or next parts of the meeting. Tonight, we have no public hearings, no ordinances, no resolutions, no action items, but we do have city manager comments. Go ahead.
And you're like 11 minutes under. So just a couple of big picture things. Obviously, Burton's been here all week. We will, once the website is up, we will put the calendar of meetings on the website so it's available to everyone so they can schedule from there. One of the functions of the website will be they can sign up for email, a listserv. So when there's announcements that come out or updates to the website itself. Anybody that signed up will get an email notifying them that there's updates to the website so they can go check it out. We'll be putting that on our own city webpage out through Facebook. So there'll be a series of ways that people can get information, specifically that Burton has updated something. So they'll know when they can go to the website and when there'll be something new out there. So that is, like Jim said, hopefully by the end of next week, they'll have that up and running, and then we'll review it. So within a couple of weeks, that should be live, and we will make that announcement on our webpage and through Facebook as well. So if you saw the picture that came up, this is just a reminder picture. We passed the ordinance for the electric vehicle parking spots not quite 30 days ago. It will go into effect next Thursday. They're now marked with these trees so that people can more easily see that those are for electric vehicles. There was a little bit of confusion with the sign, so we're just trying to make it easier for people to understand. Those fines will go into effect next Thursday. It's $40 for a non-electric vehicle to park in the electric vehicle spot, which a lot are currently doing. So we just want to make sure that they know that that's coming up. And that is all I have for now, unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Michael? Melissa?
Can you just share about the open boards?
Yeah, so the board, all board positions that are open, that announcement will be coming out shortly as well. We'll have a 30-day open period because both the planning board and the zoning commission are new, and you have to set up overlapping terms. There were, by random assignment, some of the members were given 1-year terms, so they will be up for reapplying, and anyone else can apply. There'll also be openings on some other boards. I think we still have some openings on the Historic Preservation Committee. Planning Board and Zoning Commission will both have them open. I think there's an opening coming up on the Parks and Trails Committee. All those announcements will go out in the next week or so, and there'll be about a 30-day open application period. And then in probably the first meeting in January, those will come before the commission for appointment.
And the conservation board.
And the Conservation Board as well. And that is an entirely new board, and those will be assigned the same way as we did before, where once the applicants are chosen, they'll be randomly assigned to overlapping terms.
That is posted, correct, for the Conservation Board from,
Do we have it posted out already?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that one's already out there. But they'll all be out there in the next week or so, all the boards that will have open spots on them.
thank you. All right, Melissa, Commissioner comments.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming to this meeting. This is a nice turnout for 2 really fantastic topics for our community. So thank you for coming and listening with us. Communication is something that we talk about a lot, improving communication between the city and residents. So I'm surprised Michael hasn't brought this up, so I'm going to call him out to bring it up. One is the Facebook page. I'm seeing a lot of updates and shares from our business community and nonprofits on different topics. And the other is the FAQs that recently got added, which is fantastic. So I just wanted to highlight it because it's one of a list of things since, I guess since actually your review. There's been a whole bunch of things that have been implemented. And so I just wanted to point it out, since there's a good group of people here, that this is a good place to get answers directly on hot topics for the city.
We actually referenced it the other day at Parks and Trails.
Yeah.
With having a question on one of the recreation issues. It was great.
I think it's important to also note things that were improvements and to share that with our community. So that's all. I don't have anything else.
Thank you, Melissa. Warren?
I have no comments. Thank you.
I want to thank both our speakers tonight on a real good subjects. And I think I will be missing the next commission meeting because we'll be in Florida. So I wish you well.
Thank you. And Quentin is out tonight for surgery. So I only have, actually, one of the things I was going to mention, you already did. And we have our next listening session on the 9th. As the public knows, we had listening sessions at the at the farmer's market. And one of our wants and quests was to bring the listening sessions to where people are. So this time, I think it's finalized, but it's at the Pickle Barrel. So we are trying to go to some different coffee shops in different places and restaurants as well to do the listening sessions, and it's at 8:30 on the 9th. Another thing, just for people who don't know it, I do a shout out to a community member, and that will be next meeting. I try to do it the second meeting of the month, and we talk about and celebrate people making differences in our community, because sometimes we complain too much and don't celebrate enough. So most second meetings of the month, I'll get to it, but we've had some great people giving back, and I want to make sure they're being called out. Other than that, do I have a motion from the commission on adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is adjourned at 7:26.